Do you have hip pain? Today we're going to talk about the true causes behind hip pain, but most importantly, what you can do to correct the situation permanently. Now, before we get started, a little bit of anatomy on the hip joint. It is a ball and socket joint. The socket is referred to as the acetabulum, which is where the femur, the head of the femur, called the greater trochanter, sits in the acetabulum. Now, when we're talking about hip pain, it's going to be important for you to determine whether or not you have a hip imbalance. And you can do this very easily by taking your hands, positioning them on your hips, and figuring out if one side is higher than the other. Now, remember that your foot posture affects your hip posture. And usually what you're looking for is a hip that is higher on one side. A higher hip is usually associated to a supinated foot. A supinated foot is when most of the pressure sits outwards on the external part of the foot. This can have serious consequences on the acetabulum, on the position of the greater trochanter, and on your hip joint. Now, step one is going to be to rate your pain level, 10 being the most, 1 being the least. Where do you sit on that pain scale? Are you also restricted in range of motion? And you can figure this out by lying down on a table and paying attention to the external rotation of your leg. Is one side more restricted than the other? You can also do this in a sitting position where you would bend your knee and position it on the opposite knee and figure out whether or not your hip joint feels tighter on one side. Now, once you've determined whether or not range of motion is limited, and once you've associated a number to your pain, what you're going to want to do is proceed with sensory stimulation of your feet. Why? Because your foot posture affects the mobility of your hip. So in a sitting position, you can either use a fork, hairbrush, your fingers. What you're going to want to do is simply rub the entire foot. Now, you may feel that this is ticklish, and that's okay. You're going to want to complete this sensory stimulation until the sensation numbs out. You can also use any gua sha tool or one of my personal favorites, a proprioceptive enhancer. This will allow you not only to address the superficial part of the skin, but also the deep muscles of the foot. You're then going to want to repeat this sensory stimulation on the other side. Now, what you're going to want to do is reassess your pain. Did it change? If it did, great. If it didn't, try doing some eye exercises. And I'll put a link in the description below of how to perform eye exercises as part of your daily routine. Step 2, you're going to want to take a look at your shoes. Now, you'll notice that most shoes have a default arch support that's already located into the shoe. Now, remember that skin sensitivity ranges anywhere between 3 to 24 grams of pressure, so it really doesn't take much. A slight elevation of your arch can actually modify your gait. Now, as far as custom orthotics are concerned, they serve two purposes: to position your foot in a neutral position and to support your arch on a permanent basis. This can cause your arch to become weaker, and if you already have a supinated foot, it can certainly further promote foot supination, which can further aggravate your hip pain. Now, as a rule of thumb, wearing orthotics to correct the problem is a great way to address hip pain, but you're going to want to look into different methods to stimulate your sensory receptors on a daily basis if your goal is to address the problem permanently. Step 3, you're going to want to reduce overall inflammation. Now, remember that poor posture does create inflammation in the body. If you're fighting gravity inefficiently, if your joints are wearing out unevenly on both sides of your body, there is inflammation that is being created in your body. If you add to that poor diet, or if you consume foods that are highly inflammatory, then you can certainly further exacerbate an existing condition. All junk food is made of three things: refined oils, refined sugars, and refined flours. All three are highly inflammatory, create major health issues. And if you're looking to learn more on how you can actually address inflammation in the body, check out this video right here.